Hey, everybody. Before we begin the show, I wanted to give a shout out to our friends at POWERPOOL. POWERPOOL is a mining pool and is one of the most profitable for miners. So if you have one miner at home or a fleet of miners at scale, point your workers to POWERPOOL to enjoy the best payouts. POWERPOOL supports a number of algorithms, SHA-256 for Bitcoin, X11 for Dash, and others. And of course, we're focused and we care about the most, S-CRYPT for Litecoin, Dogecoin, and now Bell's Coin, merge mining. Pointing your workers to POWERPOOL is easy with its simple user interface, and the platform also has all the reporting available that your operation needs. Typically, POWERPOOL extends a low 1% pool fee. However, if you register with the 84 million link in the show notes, you will lock in a sub 1% pool fee, which is excellent. So start mining with the most profitable pool in 2024 and register for POWERPOOL with the link in the show notes. Cheers, happy mining. Hello, welcome to the 84 Million Podcast. This is episode number 29. And rather than a live guest tonight, I'm actually going to do a replay. So I was recently on Litecoin's Litecoin Forecast evening stream. He's been running these streams for over a month, I think. And he's doing them every day. So it's a lot of work. And he's had different guests on. He invited me to come on and had a great time. So in the event you haven't seen it, here it is. And again, check out Litecoin. He's been a guest on this show twice. And he's doing a lot of good work in the space, promoting Litecoin right now, and specifically looking kind of at where's this market taking us. So without any further comment, here's that episode. Enjoy it.
So 3, 2, 1, gonna try to add him in here, and then I will change this so that we can see each other. Or maybe what would work best is if Is this too small, Kyle?
It looks good, man.
Okay. How's it going? I know we talked a little bit before, but how are you doing in general?
Yeah, I'm grateful to be on the Litecoin Forecast, and thanks for the kind words opening. And I appreciated the little shout out to the store and the podcast. So pretty cool. And let's remind everyone that you are our, I believe, fifth guest on the show. And we had you just about a month ago back on the show. So,
yeah, if you guys haven't checked that out, it was really fun doing Kyle's podcast. Super professional, way more professional than my janky live streams. But we all have our own unique skill sets and advantages here to contribute to the Litecoin community. So thanks for coming on. I really do appreciate it. You've been in the space for a long time, and generally the way we've started these is kind of explaining to the audience, if they're unfamiliar, how you got involved and what attracted you to crypto and specifically Litecoin in the first place.
That's a good question. But before I answer it, I just want to say that your stream is amazing, and bravo for everybody who's here, and more will come. I've enjoyed kind of hanging out here, and I think yours is the most chill Litecoin space around. So bravo to what you've started here the past, I guess, month. But you've been going kind of bonkers on these daily streams. So it's amazing work. But how did I get into crypto? Well, I've known about it for a while, and sometimes I feel like I tell the story because it doesn't change, because it's history. Probably back in the Ron Paul era, 2012 presidential campaign. I did some work with that campaign. We were volunteers. It was Liberty HQ out in Venice Beach, California. And there were some Bitcoiners there. And I remember we'd go to like libertarian local stuff. And like, it was like precious metals and then Bitcoin, right? It was like end the Fed era, we can't use dollars. And then Bitcoin kind of came out around that time. So that's kind of my introduction into the general space. And then Litecoin shortly after. Litecoin, I want to say, was 2013. I want to say 2013 is when I discovered Litecoin. And it was through another guy I know who, and I kind of touched base with him the other day about this. It's been years. And I'll give him the credit. I won't name his name, but I'll give him the credit because we were talking about mining and he was building these prospector mines, which were like $400. And at the time it was like, okay, we're in our 20s or whatever. He was building them and we were at like a Liberty conference in Texas. And, and at that time we were like, okay, it's great. I love it. But we knew about 4 people that were using it. And this was before exchanges, right? There was no Coinbase or anything like that. Like the user experience was pretty rudimentary. I mean, people complain about the user experience now, but it's like so much better. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I love the concept, but what am I going to do with it? It's basically a liquid, but I liked it philosophically. But again, it didn't, quote, justify the electricity back then. And the machine was like, it was right when, so 2013 was when ASICs, we kind of moved out of the node environment to mine, right? And, but that was still at 50 Litecoin a block per rewards, right? And I think the machine was only like $400, but even at $400, it didn't justify the electricity. And I was living in an apartment at the time, and the guy selling me the miner is like, oh yeah, I totally get it, but just like take it to Starbucks and plug it in there, like use someone else's electricity. But like, oh, how the space has changed, right? Do we still talk like that?
Yeah, I remember
like
people talking to me about, and actually hearing stories in the media about people using like Airbnbs and mining, using their electricity for it, or plugging into their businesses and then getting sued because their electricity bills were like thousands and thousands of dollars. So yeah, it's changed a lot, but it's interesting that you're involved so early and really through the political lens. I know back in that era, it was mainly libertarians that became interested in Bitcoin, and the narrative back then was about, breaking away from government and having personal liberty, personal freedom over your money.
Yeah.
And that's definitely changed. Did you, when you first got in, did you have this view that Litecoin and Bitcoin would become worth a lot? Did you want to buy as much as you could in the early days, or was it kind of just, you didn't take it that seriously, and then over time you got more involved?
That's a good question. So 2013 was discovery. I'll say that, but I didn't start. Okay. So I started mining on like an iPad. You could sort of do that then. And then I just gave up on it because like it had zero power and like nothing ever happened. And then I tossed the wallet. I don't think there was any kind of significant Litecoin even in it, but it's just kind of a fun story now. But 2017 was when I started to get, I guess, involved in terms of me investing personal, value into it. Because I hadn't mined, right? I didn't choose to buy the miner, and I was still very much gold and silver. So sadly, the Peter Schiff personality was very strong. And actually, so I don't really care about him anymore. I think he's sort of irrelevant in terms of what his opinion is on crypto. And I actually think it might be very disingenuous seeing that his son has a boatload of it. So it's in the family. He's going to benefit from it. But I don't know them. Okay. But I did go see him at UCLA years ago, about the same time I was describing earlier. And I was very much like gold and silver only. So even though this is cool, it's still not physical. And it didn't prove itself yet. Right. And I wasn't like a cypherpunk. I was a very libertarian, but I wasn't like a cypherpunk. I wasn't like some kind of nerd dude that looks into code. But so I liked it, but it's like I even needed it to prove itself for a little while. And then I think, so Mt. Gox happened and it was hacked, and, Bitcoin it wasn't worth a whole lot for a while. And then I think when it hit 100, I'm like, oh, wow, really? And then I just kind of like looked the other way. And then it was, I think when Bitcoin broke maybe 1,000, I'm like, okay, the cat's out of the bag. Governments can't stop this. It's proving itself. It's obvious. And I want to say that was 2017-ish, around that
early
time.
2017.
And that's when I started to really kind of get more personally interested in it, and got an exchange account or whatever and try to get my hands on Litecoin. And it was Litecoin. I had Ethereum, I had Bitcoin and Litecoin. I think that was really it. And then of course I went into I need every single, altcoin out there, and everything has a use case. It's going to solve something. I'm totally not that anymore. I've narrowed grossly down to what others have called the Nakamoto standard, and so I'm kind of really boring now in crypto. I'm not into like everything new and flashy. I want the old school stuff because it works, and I think it's proven itself. So I'm not against new stuff. I love, people can explore and sandbox and do whatever they want. I'm sure there's a lot of money to be made, right? But for me personally, I'm just more confident in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin more recently, past few years. That was probably 2021. The Eloning of things and being like, okay, well, even though it's a meme, it's still based on principles that I agree with. And even though it's inflationary, which was my initial criticism, it's non-arbitrary, right? Because the block rewards are fixed. So, and then we learn about, merge mining. So I do like Doge. Lately, I do think Bells is interesting. I know you've criticized that to a degree. I think it's interesting and it does benefit miners. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I just think that's kind of a really neat narrative. And I like it, but it's, we're talking probably one hand of my interest in actual like active cryptos. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of how I've been too. Like you see these things through the cycles, pump and dumps. They're going to come. You don't know exactly where it's going to happen, right? 2017 was ICOs, and then IDOs were like 2019 DeFi stuff.
Yeah.
And then NFTs, and now meme coins. It's really hard. It's attractive to a lot of newcomers because they think they're going to pick the right ones. But after watching it cycle to cycle, it is really hard. There is a lot of smart money out there that have huge positions and can manipulate the market and induce FOMO. And you're not going to win at their casino, but you can find things, and that's why I've aligned with you, is things that are relatively undervalued that nobody has a unfair opportunity to grab it. Anyone can buy it. And I think that's why we've focused our mindset, and it's too much, right? If your mind's on 15 different cryptocurrencies, it's impossible to have a good understanding of any one specifically. But yeah, that's a very similar story to all of us. And go ahead.
Yeah, and Litecoin is the one that's like top of the top for me. It's just, I think after I ignored it, I decided I'm never going to again. And that's, I think, why it really, like, even more than Bitcoin, like, I think, and this is probably many of us, we wanted the altcoins to trade into Bitcoin to like, do the oscillation thing. And like people do that, and that's fine if that's your goal. But like, I remember I put a tweet out, or I think I probably repeated myself because I really think so. Like initially you come in to get Litecoin to get more Bitcoin, but then where we're headed, we want Litecoin for Litecoin. Like we're not here to swap it into something else. If anything, we're swapping other things into Litecoin, right? That's what I've been doing. I don't give advice, right? But I'm very confident in Litecoin, and I just think it does have an underdog narrative as one of its many narratives. And it's the silver to Bitcoin's gold thing. I mean, I still really believe in that. Yeah, we can be a meme coin now. That's fine. I think it's fun. So we got a lot, right? But I think, yeah, absolutely. If we're going to talk about, quote, like blue chip things, like Bitcoin went bonkers. Ethereum did very, very well. We'll probably continue to do well. Dogecoin did. Like the only one is Litecoin. And 2021 was a little weird because I think I was expecting it then. And like, yeah, we had some heights, but nothing crazy. So, yeah, I think Litecoin is absolutely the one that is going to catch up in the same way.
For sure.
And that's why people should watch your show so they can learn specifics about charts and all the stuff that I don't do. It's in my gut. It's in my gut.
Yeah, no, I think it's the right gut feeling. How do you feel compared to early on in Litecoin versus today? Like you've been around for a long time, watched it. What's kept you convicted about it? Kept you bullish? And then how do you feel it's sort of changed over time throughout the years?
I mean, in some ways it hasn't. I mean, we do have new stuff now. Even Charlie Lee says that, sound money is boring. And I kind of agree with that. So it's not like Litecoin has done all this stuff. But it's grown in every way. extremely reliable. We have MWeb. That's huge. I mean, it's 2 years old now, going on 3 years old. And we just got it rolled out in the past 6 months in mobile kind of environments. But that's significant that we have on-chain privacy optionally. So that's huge. Ordinals, I think, are fun. Initially, I'm like, I don't know about this. And then I'm like, okay, we're handling it fine. And I think there's a case to be made that, they're of benefit. I don't like always like, it doesn't mean I like every ordinal ever, inscribed or like all these runes or whatever. Like, so I'm not like a prohibitionist, but it doesn't mean I love it. But I do think it's sort of fun, right? And I think it's important to have fun. So that's a little aspect of Litecoin that I think is kind of cool. So we're doing everything that Bitcoin does, but we do it better. And, we have the uptime meme too. We've never been down. And I think the silver aspect, I think, is neat too. And maybe that sounds kind of old school now. Like, I don't know if anybody in 2024 is thinking about the silver aspect, but like that was compelling. Like Charlie Lee's post on Bitcoin talked about Bitcoin being gold and Litecoin being the silver to Bitcoin's gold. And I'm pretty sure that was before like anybody was even talking like that. So that was pretty prescient, maybe prophetic. And I think it's true, right? So if we want to look at, again, when I termed that kind of the Nakamoto standard or whatever, Indigo, many of you guys know Indigo, he mentions that, or he did for a long time. But it's the idea that we have multiple currencies. It's not this Bitcoin only stuff, right? And like even under a gold standard, it was never just gold. It was never gold only, right? Even though it was a world currency, you had, gold, silver, and then lesser metals too, like copper or whatever. Like they were all in circulation, and like the people's currency was like silver. So I think that's kind of still true of Litecoin. Like I think Bitcoin is becoming so much more elite, and it's ossifying. I mean, it's going up, right? Number go up is happening. And again, I'm not a prohibitionist. I'm still pro Bitcoin. Sometimes that's really tested with the maximalists, okay? But I'm still pro Bitcoin on principle, right? Because I think principally Litecoin and Bitcoin are basically the same, right?
Yep.
And I think more of us are going to, maybe more maximalists will start admitting that too. Because maligning Litecoin, they're maligning their own project, right? On principle. So I think that's probably not very smart.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think this whole idea that, this is going to be a hoarded asset and like what are on-chain fees going to look like, it's becoming very inaccessible unless you were very early and had a lot of Bitcoin. And for those people, they can enjoy it. And for other people, they're going to chase something that's going to be very elusive, or they're going to be going on second layers and beyond. And that's not what I want. We still have the Bitcoin experience on Litecoin. I think we still have the old school Bitcoin ethos in many ways on Litecoin. And we're not ruined. So we will be tested. What do you think about that? Do you think that our space will be tested as Litecoin continues to move forward into the future and more people start coming in?
I do think that a lot of the narratives that have persisted are, with whatever chain, Bitcoin being the most dominant, there's a lot of easily provable false narratives out there. I think eventually all those things will die, all the false narratives, and so it will be tested quite a bit. And if Litecoin rallies, I think it'll be a really hated rally just because it's so underowned. That's what you typically see. But yeah, this space is going to be tested, right? Because I think we're going to move from a speculative market where it's 99% based on hype and narratives to eventually, these currencies will proliferate in the real world. And I think that transition is going to be testing and trying. And we should see kind of a narrowing of the broader cryptocurrency space, just like after the .com bubble, where you see a handful of real winners and the rest, not very high in relative terms for market cap. So yeah, it'll be extremely testing, but it's cool to hear that, the reasons why you've maintained your bullishness, network effects, it hasn't changed much. You mentioned the silver to Bitcoin's gold narrative. Yeah, that's still the narrative, even though Charlie Lee said it a long time ago. What's convinced to me is that you can look at it in the network stats, and to me, it's like gold to Bitcoin's gold, right? you never could have a second gold in real life because you can't change one metal into another. But in crypto, since it's open source, really the only thing making it gold is its network effects, but it's losing that. So it's like rising on this momentum trade where people just hype it, price goes up, gets more hype, but its transaction stats aren't moving up. And yeah, like you mentioned again, it is being hard to grasp for people that aren't wealthy, and
I think so.
It's they're getting priced out, not just from the price of Bitcoin, right? Because you can buy as small amount of Bitcoin as you want, but just the ability to use it. The fees have hovered like $5 to $50 over the last 7 years, and
that's wild.
Yeah, it should just get more expensive. That's what should continue to happen. It's like gentrification in a neighborhood in Manhattan or something. You price out everyone; they have to move or not use it. So yeah, we'll see. I wanted to ask you about when you got involved. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, but when you got involved in podcasting, and what like compelled you to start taking your own time, personal time, to make a podcast for specifically Litecoin?
Probably similar motivations as you had for setting up your stream. It's kind of this sort of passion you have inside of you, and it just comes out, right? I had asked other people to do this because we were all on this platform. I mean, you're streaming, I think, on YouTube and Twitter, X, and I met you on X. So a lot of us are there. Some of us are gone now, and the space grows. It kind of ebbs and flows, and we're still sticking around. And that can be tough, by the way. You mentioned, how do I remain bullish? Sometimes it's very hard. Like, I'm very convinced with Litecoin and its principles, but the community is sometimes hard. Although I love the Litecoin fam. I love the Litecoin community. I'm a member of that Litecoin community, right? But sometimes I think we can really feel the weight of things in these market swings. But euphoria will come. And we've had a very good few weeks or months. Can I say months? It's been a good kind of swing. I mean, I remember 3 months ago we were at 60 or something. So we're getting some of that, and then the Litecoin account and everything else. But I need to answer your question. What was your question?
No worries. I was asking about when you got involved in podcasting and
podcasting. Yes, right.
What motivated you specifically? You kind of touched on it, but
yeah. So but that was specific. That's what I want. So yes, I'd asked some other folks to do it. I set up 84million.com. I liked the URL. It was available. It was very descriptive of Litecoin and its ultimate supply cap. I just wanted to fill it with basically, I wanted it to be a resource. It is a resource. By the way, it's still online, 84million.com. You do have to spell it out, right? Initially, it started with just kind of like some FAQ type things, which I put together, right? Because I wrote in a previous life, and I'm comfortable to put language down. So I did. I'm like, okay, let's just put some stuff down for Litecoin and have it be kind of an educational resource for people. And then I created just some images that I shared, and then I made like a flag. It's like a old school, it was called the Moultrie flag, right? And it said liberty on it. It was like a war flag, if you're like an American or knows some of like the Revolutionary era stuff. It's I believe it's on the South Carolina flag currently, kind of pays tribute to that now. I can't remember. But anyway, the Moultrie flag, it says liberty on it, and it had a little crescent moon on it. So I just changed the L to the Litecoin L and the B to the Bitcoin B, like Litecoin, Bitcoin are part of liberty, which I agree with. Mm-hmm. So it kind of was just this little design I made, and then I actually made a flag and listed it. I'm like, well, the site is 100%, self-funded labor of love, but maybe somebody would be interested in like buying something like merch or whatever. And that's how the store was born. It was like 5 flags. There were 5 of them. And then it just grew from there, stickers and shirts. And I've been through all sorts of, kind of evolutions for that. But check it out, 84million.com/shop. Thank you, W, for the promo slot. The podcast, I didn't ever think I'd be running it, but I'm glad I'm running it. And I got to talk to a lot of neat people, and we'll get to talk to more neat people going forward. Sometimes it can be like, why do I keep doing this? You know,
Mhm.
because it's taking out of personal time and life and everything. But again, I believe that it's something that I can contribute now, because I'm not going to be able to do it forever, and that can stand and help somebody else and grow the space and have Litecoin be known. Because I'm like, there's so many Bitcoin podcasts, there's so many
Yeah.
general crypto podcasts. Like, who's out there promoting just Litecoin only, right? And so I wanted to kind of contribute to that, and that's why the 84 Million podcast is around. So we have spaces with Grant. We've got you. We've got the 84 Million podcast. I know Shan and Look into Litecoin. That's an awesome site. He had done some podcasts. There's another account coming up in the future called Learn Litecoin, which I'm going to have him on the show soon. Spoiler alert. Hopefully I didn't leak something on their team. But there's more coming. There's going to be more Litecoin podcasts, and there's going to be more Litecoin websites. And by the way, the foundation site is amazing, and they just totally reskinned it. And so I think that's Robbie's efforts there. He does an awesome job just visually. So the Litecoin ecosystem is growing, and the educational resources are growing, and I can be a part of that. And that's kind of why I started, although I didn't intend to. I'll say one more thing, and then I'll end. It was me talking with David Burkett, right? And Webb was young. I'm like, I want to talk to David. We've messaged a lot already, and I like him. He's a great guy, and he agreed to come. So we just did like a single one-off standalone interview. That was episode 1, and it went from there. So that's kind of the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's interesting, because that's kind of this. I almost got involved a lot earlier in the podcasting thing, or was going to try to, because I just felt like there was information that wasn't being discussed that I couldn't find anywhere, that I wanted to see myself. And so that's kind of how you started with David Burkett. You're like, man, this guy is super smart. This MWeb thing is a pretty big deal, but nobody's going to find out about it unless I do something. So it's cool that Litecoin still has that, right? With no funding, just has community people who are passionate that do it on their own time for free. And I agree with you. I think that eventually there should be a lot more podcast websites, people talking about it. If it makes the type of price move I think it's likely to make, well, and over time, naturally, I think that networks, Bitcoin and Litecoin, converge in network activity like they are. You're seeing, right? The divergence between Bitcoin's network activity and Litecoin's has diminished over the last 7 years, and I think that trend will continue. So naturally, the price, after we get past all these, crazy momentum-based narratives, eventually it should approach the market cap of Bitcoin. And then, to me, every Bitcoin podcast is really like a Litecoin podcast too. It's the same narratives, so that'll be cool to see. And I know it's been hard for you. You mentioned that doing this when there's not that many people interested can make you think, like, why am I doing this? Same with price. It's like, if price is not rallying, a lot of people get psychologically beat up. It's impossible. Even I feel that too.
Yeah.
But I think having all the content out there and continuing to do it makes it a future resource for people, because the information that you're providing on your podcast is in a way timeless, right? It's not something that's going to change, right? The fundamentals are what they are, and they will remain that way. So I'm thinking, the way I was looking at it is putting this stuff out there for in the future, people can reference it, and maybe one day it will become popular. I think Litecoiners in general, just this asset is due for a sentiment change and flip, and I hope a lot of the early people get some vindication out of it. Do you ever feel that, like, the Litecoin community and all the people that have been bullish have been overlooked, misunderstood, and they deserve some vindication?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think so. We're willing to speak the name of Litecoin. I mean, we're not the omitters, and that's another thing too. It's just like everything that's true about Bitcoin. I'm using an absolute, but I think it's correct. Everything that's true about Bitcoin is true about Litecoin, right? And Yeah, but we're willing to talk about Litecoin when they'll use it all the time, but they won't tell you about it. And I think that's ridiculous. So Litecoin is an amazing cryptocurrency, and it's going to function and work for you. And people are using it all over the world when they don't even have good money. So there's absolutely zero to be concerned with Litecoin. Yes, now you're getting institutional interest with, the Canary Capital ETF, and Grayscale's been in for a while, so I'm pretty sure they're going to convert to an ETF. Be interested in your thoughts on that. And others, I think I saw another one recently in the past week or so about there's like a pooled crypto account, which is going to have Litecoin in it. I still don't have my mind up and haven't made my mind up entirely about that. But the point is, it's a free, it's not a free market, but there are free aspects of the market. So, we can't prohibit institutions from buying it. It's decentralized and available for sale, and miners are willing to sell it. So, and I'm willing to sell it. I mean, I bought Litecoin, I've sold Litecoin, I've used it as money. I mean, it goes in and out all the time. It's currency, right? But I think Litecoin is super strong, and I think there will be vindication for sure. And I'm looking forward to it. So.
For sure, yeah. I like the point that you make about being willing to say the word Litecoin. I even know, like, in myself, saying that word, it can make you look to the broader market like uncool or unpopular, or like, the broader market sees it as useless, right? It's just like so people, it's like absurd or junior high to me, where
stats, right?
Yeah, where if you're nice to like some kid that might be a genius, nerdy, but he's unpopular, then everyone will associate you with that type of cool factor or whatever, make you uncool. And I always thought that was the silliest thing, even back in school. Like, I don't care if I find something for somebody valuable, it doesn't matter, right? What other people think. And there's so much data behind Litecoin's adoption statistics. Far and above almost every other proof of work asset, right? Compared to Dogecoin, Bitcoin Cash, it's 10 times higher. And it's provable too through multiple sources. You can look at BitPay or BitRefill, the largest merchant processors, and it's showing you that it's not fake volume. I know Maximus, even some prominent ones, would make fun of Litecoin network stats. They'd almost poke fun of people talking about it. They're like, yeah, they're just focused on some network statistics, when really the only thing that drives money's value long term are network effects, and that's what the data shows. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that whole psychology? Do you think it's just like natural human behavior to shun away? It just, to me, the data supports the idea, and it's legit, it's valid, has high data integrity. So I'm confused as to why so many people will think it's uncool or hate on it and make fun of people that support it. It's like, I don't understand the reasoning. Do you have any insight on that?
I don't entirely understand either. It was top 10 most of its existence, right? It's the first real altcoin. It's of the altcoins, it's the last one that anybody cares about that's still around from that era. Namecoin, I mean, I haven't checked the stats in like months. But the last time I did check, they were like 600 something. So unless you're going to scroll multiple pages through CoinMarketCap, you're not going to find it unless you want to look for it. So like there are some ancient history coins, very, very, very few. But Litecoin is still a prominent coin 13 years after the fact. And I don't know how it got initially belittled. I mean, I think price action... again, it's the one of, Bitcoin went bonkers, is still going up. It's over 100,000. I mean, that's remarkable, right? Ethereum is several thousand, right? So we haven't gotten our comma yet. Dogecoin went, hit almost $1. I forget, its all-time high. Doesn't matter. But the point is, they've had these mega rallies, and we did too in 2017, right? But that was, I think, the last talking point we can use, when it went from like $3 to $3.90. And by the way, this next few months, as I think you've been talking about regularly, we could be very much winding up at the same thing. So again, look out, folks. But it's weird. And again, Bitcoiners, and maybe Bitcoiners aren't maximalists, right? I still like to think there's a difference, but there's so many maximalists. The people with microphones are maximalists typically, and Vlad's kind of an outlier, and he's a great Litecoiner. And I think he's. Oh, I'll leave it at that. Follow Vlad Castay. He puts out some great content, and he's a Bitcoiner, but he loves Litecoin. But I mean, even the Litecoin summit this summer with the fireside chat with Charlie Lee and Peter McCormick, what Bitcoin did, right? He's like, oh yeah, Bitcoiners. Oh, a ton of them use Litecoin, and he kind of just said, shh. Now we still did kind of add that little modifier, shh. So maybe that just needs to be deleted, and I think it will be, but we're still adding those little modifiers in that community. But he's admitting, like, yeah, people use Litecoin all the time. So I think there is sort of, and I don't want to wear too many conspiracy theory hats because I'm not in rooms where people talk. I don't make people's decisions for them. I don't know. But it does seem a little bit bizarre how it does sort of feel like we're a little suppressed. But I don't want to really go there. I have no proof. I have no data. People have speculated on exchanges and, who's selling what. I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade. But I do think it's weird that there is sort of this kind of like, really, Litecoin? You're serious? When it's like every network is not, or every metric is knocking it out of the park. So I can say concretely the fact that people like are censoring Litecoin, and I'm not saying that or self-censoring, they're censoring and self-censorship, right? They're omitting, and this is individuals choosing to not say, and it may be along the lines of what you were describing, right? There's just kind of this vibe and we just don't want to talk about it. I don't know, but there's definitely not enough media out there talking about the benefits of Litecoin and the facts of Litecoin, which is why we're here and why we're growing. Because by the way, that was the fact with Bitcoin too, for like several years. And then they got podcasts and they got books and things changed. So things will change for us. It's already changing for Litecoin. But there still is a little bit of that we have to deal with. And it's on its way out, right? So.
For sure. Yeah. I think after the last Foundation summit, I noticed a huge difference in like mind shares, like mental capital that was involved in Litecoin with Paul Stork and Vlad. Definitely seeing a shift. But it's funny to me because I just think about how much credibility the meme coin influencers like Ansem and some of these other guys have when they're promoting things that ultimately probably are worth nothing, maybe some cultural value, but they're mostly pump and dumps, and they aren't laughed at for pumping those. But if you talk about Litecoin, it's like it's worse than talking about meme coins in like the general public's eyes. It's hilarious to me. But we can move on from.
I just want to have one more comment on that. It's kind of a funny story. So we were out in Southern California visiting friends, and we were at a smaller house party. I forget what event it was, and I was wearing my Litecoin hat, and this was actually, I still have it. I bought it on Etsy like a few years ago. It's an embroidered one with just like the L on it, kind of a dad hat. And I wore it to this. And a guy's like, "Are you wearing a Litecoin hat?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir." And this was, I think, in like 2020 or something. It was several years ago. But it was kind of hilarious. And he's sort of like, "Are you serious?" But then like we ended up talking for like a long time. And he's like, "Oh, wow. Like Litecoin, So, if you stand on your 2 feet, you stand on your 2 feet, and you can stand on Litecoin, right? Like there's zero reason why you can't, other than maybe it didn't break $1,000 yet or something like that. But like it's had pretty good rallies too, right? It's just 2021 was a little bit of an anomaly, and it's going down, and see where it goes. But we can move on. Thank you.
Yeah,
wear Litecoin hats and see what happens.
Yeah, anytime I talk to people in person and they kind of make fun of it, then I talk to them and they realize I've been involved in a long time and have much greater understanding than them, and then they will take it serious. But it takes like forcing them to think a little deeper on the subject.
Yeah.
But most everyone in my real life that I've talked to about it explained the value prop. It's made sense to them. So it was hard, right? Even me, right? Early on in Bitcoin, like late 2016, early 2017, I thought I kind of believed the same narratives everyone else did. But then when the scaling wars happened, I thought you'd see substitution and eventually just another chain. I thought at the time it would be Litecoin. But But now it should be way easier because you have the data to support it. It's actually happening. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. What's your? I'm curious as to your outlook, or maybe the next year, or at least next few months. I've explained my thesis. I think we're heading for a parabolic mania, at least into Q2 of this year. It still doesn't feel like we've hit euphoria like we saw in 2021 or 2017. So. Do you think that's coming? Where do you see us going these next few months to a year?
I was thinking it would have happened in 2021 and it didn't. And I think that was disappointing. And I kind of bit my tongue for a while. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm wrong or whatever. And clearly we was in that environment, or I was in that environment. We were in that environment, slightly off in our projections. And again, I don't really go deep into charts and like, you would be the person to go to for more of a informed view on how to look at cycles and time frames and highs and lows and things like this. Like I don't do that. I can sort of get it, and I think there's some merit to it, but I'm more like, I'm convinced on the underlying asset, and I think it's going to be here for a long, long time. And I can look at what happened to Bitcoin and others in the system, in the space, and see that is something that we could also enjoy, right? So I do think a comma is coming. How high beyond the comma? It's hard to say. Like the maximalists are all saying it's going to be 17 all over again, right? And if that's the case, that was when we went from $3 to $3.90. So if we do like a low of 60 in our current kind of environment, that's put us up to like 6,800 or something nuts, which is, it's hard for me to even conceive. I can't project that, but like nobody thought it would happen to Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So I do think we're going to break that number, and how far, I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing, as anybody else. I don't, I'm not a fortune teller. So
For sure.
I'm interested to see where it's going, but I think we're in for something quite remarkable, and some kind of the psychology, nobody wants to buy it when it's $60, but when it's, 1,200, everyone's like, I gotta have Litecoin. Like, that's just the way it works, I guess. But
it is,
yeah.
Well, I would agree with you. I think just from like a broader macro view, I really keep coming back to the fact that I think this is one of the last speculative bull markets, maybe for all financial assets. And I think that it'll be more like 2017 in terms of euphoria. You have all the bullish narratives that are coming into play with Trump and, what they're going to do with crypto. And then also, I think we're at the end stages of a credit cycle. Typically, you see parabolic rises in all financial assets, and crypto is still so tiny. And for Litecoin specifically, what I've always thought, and like my investing experience since I was like 12 years old, well, really, I didn't know anything back then, but through college, I always thought to myself, like, the bigger the divergence between expectations and reality, the more the opportunity. And I've never seen something so out of whack with the future than Litecoin against Bitcoin. And I can understand why the market doesn't see it, because this is still a relatively new thing for most people. Financial system super confusing for most people. Money itself is very confusing, and we've never had a money that works like Bitcoin, where the more people that use it, the higher the cost. And so I think we couldn't have a better setup for Litecoin. And if we see that fundamental catalyst that I've been explaining on the channel a long time, where we see this parabolic run and this mass migration from Bitcoin to Litecoin for the daily users, it can get pretty nutty towards the end. You have all these multiplier effects that can come into play. So I'm really excited to see what happens. And like you were saying, as soon as the sentiment shifts and price goes up on a relative basis more than other assets, which I think, after looking at the charts, like Litecoin against the altcoin market's been sideways for a year. The previous time it was sideways for a year was November 21 to November 22, and then we had the pre-halving run up. It went up like 150% against altcoins, but nobody was paying attention to the space at the time. You didn't have a bunch of capital rotating in. But if it happens again, which I think we're very close to, yeah, people will chase it, and it has a fundamental demand catalyst. People should be surprised. If everyone was expecting Litecoin to go up a lot, like they were actually in 2021, it's hard to imagine, but if you recall back to 2021, there's way more big account influencers talking about it. And so it's good to me to see almost nobody paying attention. I don't know if you feel the same way, but do you feel more confident when nobody's talking about it, or do you feel better?
Well, yeah, because then we're further from euphoria, right? Because euphoria, everybody's talking about it. It's just kind of a wild experience. I said something a few weeks ago, like, I'm not getting as excited until we're over 420. Like, we've already done 390, 420 like twice, right? So
yeah,
that's easy, right? And it's beyond that as discovery on where the next leg is. And then if it goes up crazy and drops down, I'm thinking, so that's an interesting question I'd probably have for you, would be like, let's say we hit, 7,000 for a Litecoin and then it, plummets down. I mean, our lows are going to be way higher. I mean, we're not going to see 60 again. It'll be hundreds or low thousands probably after the crash. So the whole space is just ratcheting up, and there's like no Litecoin even on supply side right now in terms of at least the miners.
Yeah, so historical lows for miner reserves, historical highs for hodlers, historical highs for daily users and network activity. So unlike all the other chains that go up and down with price, Litecoin and network activity increases despite price going down. So it's at extreme points of supply constriction and levels of demand with the future potential of massive increases in transactional demand. So it has the best setup. If it does rally, like I think it's very possible if these things come true.
Very likely, yes.
I do think that we will see a nasty correction in all of crypto because it's still so speculative. And like we were talking about at the beginning, I think there's going to be this transition period from speculative casino market to real world adoption. And I think that'll take some time. But I am confident long term that if Bitcoin succeeds, Litecoin, in 10 years from now, will approach 0.25 on that ratio, but it might take a decade or longer, and Bitcoin still has the possibility of failing. So I don't think that's going to happen. I have confidence in the crypto market, but assuming there's enough demand for Bitcoin and it actually succeeds, people use it as money rather than just governments taking control, then I think Litecoin does extremely well over the next 10 years.
I think so too.
But yeah, well, the speculative market, I think we all have to, since we've been involved so long, make sure to take profits. I know a lot of people are super convinced and don't want to feed they look at the current system, fiat monetary system, as evil. But I think you got to take care of yourself and realize we're still attached to it. And if you can change your life, you got to take some profits. How do you feel on that? Like we're stuck in this speculative casino market. We're kind of forced to participate whether we want to or not. What are your plans for potentially exiting a portion of your crypto, or if the price gets to certain levels, what would you plan to do?
Yeah, I've like I said, I've sold probably as much Litecoin as I'm actually at a personal low, right? And I'm not some whale that ever was. I bought it on a market or whatever. I didn't mine it. So we're looking at 2017 and beyond. I bought, $15 Litecoin. I bought $400 Litecoin, and that's fine. I'm confident in it, and it's what I wanted to do. So we shouldn't buy something and cry about it, right? I think that's problematic. But we need to be responsible. I mean, don't be foolish. I hope I'm not foolish, right? I've sold crypto to, use it to buy real world assets. If I can sell Litecoin and, pay off a home, I'd do it. If anybody else here can do it, I don't know why you wouldn't, right? So yeah, I'm not like, we're going to hold this until we die. That's a maximalist thing. We can go in and out of it. I mean, the coffee club, I've given my roaster lots of Litecoin at $60, right? And that was, I'm paying him in Litecoin when you don't get any lower than low. So he's getting more of my Litecoin, right? But the point is, the concept was, this is a coffee for the Litecoin community, and I'm going to pay the roaster on chain with Litecoin. And I think that's a good principle, and I believe in it. And so again, this is money. We're not I don't know how we got. I mean, I know about the HODL, kind of where that came from, and there's nothing wrong with hodling. I can just call it saving. Like, it's obviously better to save than to spend, but like nobody doesn't like not spend, right?
For
So
sure.
it's both, right? So Litecoin comes in, Litecoin goes out, right? It's what I need for my life, right? If I don't have to sell any, I won't. If I do need to pay something or whatever, I'll do it. And I mean, obviously, I want to accumulate like anybody else, right? If you believe in something, you
Mhm.
wish you had more of it over time, obviously. But it kind of comes and goes. So, and again, if we go up to highest of highs and it crashes down, I'll probably be buying in bits and pieces as it goes up and buy some on the bottom. It's just the way it goes, right? So
Yeah, I like that. I
it's
think
hard to say. I mean, Bitcoiners don't ever want to spend it. I think Litecoiners still believe in spending, and
Mhm.
our fees definitely allow for it. And the last time I did spend Bitcoin, it was actually a really nerve-wracking poor experience. I'll admit it. Like, I'm way more comfortable in the Litecoin environment, even though like it's the same thing. It still feels a lot better. It's quicker. It's just you see the value transact that much quicker, and there's like no hiccups. I don't replace my fee and wonder if the person's going to have a timeout before he gets it. Like, we don't have any of that stuff. Does it mean we will never see that? We could, especially if things really, people dogpile our chain. We could, but I think we're built better for it. And so far, every test we've had, we've been fine, right? When people were block spamming with ordinals in the early days, like, we did fine. So I think we're set up to handle that a lot better.
I would agree. It's not. It's a better user experience for me. You don't have to compete with other transactions, so yeah, you don't have to worry about replacing your transaction with a higher fee because it's not being mined. You might have to eventually worry about that, but we still have like 10x increase in transactions before we get there, and then you have Mimblewimble too that you can use. So it's like two chains in one. So yeah, that's cool. And you mentioned something that maybe we can talk about a little bit. I know it's getting close to an hour, so maybe you have time for a few more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Mentioning that Litecoiners, at least the community, is not as focused on the hodl mentality. And I think that's important for a lot of people to understand. From a economic point of view, money is there to spend it. I mean, you can save it or spend it, but it's not an income producing asset. It's not generating yield. Yeah, people talk about Bitcoin yield. It's just because more people are buying it.
Mhm.
Uh, and maybe the network's growing, so you can speculate on monetization. But Bitcoin's not growing in monetization anymore. It's actually declining in dominance. So at some point, in order to be productive in an economy, you have to spend the money or invest the money in something else to go produce something. And I wanted to ask you, do you see, so like these medium of exchange and store of value narratives, it seems like the broader economic community or crypto community think that a money is either one or the other. They look at Litecoin as a medium of exchange and then Bitcoin as a store of value. But I've always thought that they both go together.
They
If
have to
it's
be
not
both.
a good
Mhm.
store of value, it's not a good medium of exchange. And if it's with Bitcoin, it seems like it's promoted so heavily as a good store of value, but a lot of people can't use it. So what are your general thoughts on that? I kind of align with the idea that Litecoin, since it is preferred as a good medium of exchange, that it will see more people start to store their value on it. But I'm curious on your perspective there.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Bitcoin is a medium of exchange. It is a money. Even Ethereum, I could argue, is a medium of exchange. It can be used like a money. I think it's more like a decentralized supercomputer, but it wasn't created to be like a currency, right? I mean, it is. I'm not saying it's not, but
Mhm.
maybe I am saying it's not. It's not. I believe Litecoin proof of work is cryptocurrency, in my opinion. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. Litecoin is definitely a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is a money. I'm not going to say it's not. It's been more congested. It is slower than Litecoin. The fees are a lot higher, so it becomes a little bit more cumbersome as a money, right? But maybe there's a use case to use that form of money versus Litecoin. I don't know what that environment would be, but maybe there is one. Um, the other one would be but basically it did prove itself as a money, and then it became this so-called store of value. It didn't start as a store of value. Like people used to talk about, let's go buy our coffee with Bitcoin and we're going to have it at point of sale. And that was an early narrative for a long time. And it's just not the case anymore. So something's changed, and we're following the same path as Litecoin. Like you can use Litecoin as money. People all over the world are using Litecoin as money. And I think the store of value will follow that, just like it did for Bitcoin, right? And obviously, why would you exchange anything that doesn't have value?
Exactly.
Right? Why would you exchange anything that you have to? The reason we're exchanging is because it's worth something, right? So it's already proven that Litecoin is also a store of value. It's not 100K, but it's a store of value. And the network is a value. 100% uptime is a value, right? Mm-hmm. The ability to mine it, if you're a miner, is value. Like there's so much that goes into why it's important, like why Litecoin is important, as how you describe it as the perfect substitute for Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at the BitPay stats and look at on-chain stats, people are preferring to hold on to it over Bitcoin more often now. The people actually natively using this money are showing a preference for Litecoin. It's just the speculators haven't really caught up with what's happening. And you brought up that point that early on in Bitcoin, I remember that nobody looked at it as a store of value. People just looked at it as like this online currency first, where you could buy things you normally couldn't with dollars. So that's what got its early network effects. And it seems so similar to me to Litecoin today. It's like the narratives for Bitcoin back then, very early on, are almost identical to Litecoins today. It's just been so hard for Litecoin to get off the ground because it's been overshadowed by the speculative network effects that Bitcoin has and the price appreciation that reinforce psychologically these false narratives about Bitcoin. But do you see that similar? I know you're back around pretty early on. Do you think the Litecoin narratives today are very similar to Bitcoin's like 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we didn't have Roger Ver or whatever. He actually wasn't very friendly, I think, for a while with Litecoin. But actually the past few years, I think he's been a lot more positive with Litecoin. So like we even in the early days of Bitcoin, there were Bitcoiners that were speaking of Bitcoin, but I think there was more of a mutual kind of cooperation between the two chains back then that I feel had been lost in the rise of this maximalism stuff, and the kind of corruption, in my opinion, of Austrian economics, right? But yeah, I think Bitcoiners and Litecoiners should work together. I think they did back then, and they still are. We're just not hearing about it. You know, I think again, you can. If you have your node, open it up and see what it says. Right on the front, Bitcoin developers, Litecoin developers, right? They're shaking hands. They're still shaking hands. The code is still compatible and very friendly, right? And we need them both, right? I don't personally want to use Bitcoin anymore. I want to use Litecoin, right? But that doesn't negate Bitcoin or the value of Bitcoin. I'm just not as interested in it for my life.
For sure. Yeah, I think anyone who uses it probably, the only reason you would really need Bitcoin over Litecoin is if someone really wanted payment in Bitcoin over Litecoin, they preferred that. It's like the merchant demands it. It's like, okay, I'll pay them in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Or you need extra double spend security. Like if you're transacting $10, $50 million in crypto, you probably would want to send them Bitcoin over Litecoin just so you have that extra hash rate, higher percent, like higher confidence in that first confirmation than with Litecoin. But that's like very edge cases that the vast majority of people,
extreme edge cases,
wouldn't need the money for. So
yeah. And even with hash rate now, I mean, our hash rate in Litecoin today is higher than it's ever been, and it's higher than Bitcoin was a few years ago. So we're already more secure than the Bitcoin that was, right?
Yeah, it's way higher than Bitcoin in 2017. So it's Bitcoin has all this extra security from all the speculation, and nobody even really needs.
Before I was in your waiting room when you were going over the prices and the metrics earlier, and like you're saying that on average people are actually sending higher value in Litecoin than Bitcoin now. I mean, we're talking 50 or like, what's it, sub 100 versus like an 150. But, we've seen those crazy transactions where it's like, multi-million dollar transfers and they're paying like 4 cents. Like, it's just totally wild.
Yeah, and you can use Litecoin for multi-million-dollar purchases. People do
So
it.
why aren't they using Bitcoin for it?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. A lot of the watches and expensive jewelry that people are buying are paying in Litecoin over Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's median transaction value today is like the same as Litecoin. It's funny. It's just one has a huge speculative premium. But
yeah, they have a lot of microphones, lots of attention. They now have presidential candidates and presidents. So, I mean, they've done a lot of work for sure. And I think, some of the gains in capital and, intellectual and material have rolled into them growing their community. And that's natural and good. And we'll see where it goes. But so they've done a lot. Bitcoin didn't get here by accident, right? But
yeah.
so I acknowledge that, but it doesn't mean that they've got all the attention. If you have all the attention, you're going to do just fine.
For sure. Yeah, marketing, extremely good marketing, which results in price going up, which is the best marketing in itself. But my point always is you can't force something to be something that it's not. Like money for 8 billion people in the world, it's just
impossible.
It's just
not on chain. Not on chain.
Yeah. And then if it's not on chain, like a lot of people think, through governments issuing like fake whatever paper Bitcoin against real Bitcoin, or banks doing the same, it's like that erodes the whole value prop right away. So it really is impossible. That's why you're seeing Litecoin grow despite all the Lightning Network narratives or whatever other scaling solutions that are promoted. So
and I have to wonder, like, if governments are actually going to be doing these strategic Bitcoin reserves, and I'm leaving out if they add other crypto assets to those reserves. But I mean, Bitcoin is going to be locked up, in cold storage by governments. I mean, how much liquidity is going to be around for you to use? I mean, so that even limits it even more than it's limited now, right? If all 21 million were circulating and distributed across the entire population, it would still be, I mean, it's not going to happen unless they scale, and they're not.
Yeah, I've always thought it was impossible to scale the chain. The only way really is to increase block sizes. But to me, that's increasing centralization risk and not scaling. I've always thought it was perfectly unscalable. The only way it would work is through multiple chains. And that's what's happening. We'll see. Maybe there's some innovation down the road, but 13 years in, there's not much that has changed. So it's hard for me to imagine something dramatically changes scaling into the future. What are your thoughts on the last question I have for you? The thoughts on the Bitcoin strategic reserve that governments are preparing to do. What do you think motivated them to do this? And then what do you think how big of an impact do you think that's going to have on the broader crypto market?
Well, we have to see if it happens. So it's in the air. It's being discussed. I mean, RFK was talking about it. He is now on the Trump team. Trump is president-elect. He's talking about it. He likes Bitcoiners. That's a good thing. I think that's good. I think generally the space will have some reprieve, at least in the United States, right? For the Americans. But I mean, kind of what happens in America ripples out, to the rest of the world, right? To a degree. For whether you like it or not, it's just kind of the way it goes. So I think crypto will do well broadly. And thankfully, the president uses Bitcoin and crypto. He doesn't just say Bitcoin, he says crypto. So all are defended under that. I think there will only ever be a few commodities, and that's where I think Litecoin shines, right? Because if you just launch a meme token, it's not going to be a commodity, right? So the way Charlie launched this, the way Litecoin was designed from day one, I think is to its defense and something very special. But I think crypto generally there's brighter days coming. A lot of that is going to come to Litecoin, I believe, based upon what we've been sharing this whole time and what you've been sharing daily. I think something's brewing. So it's kind of an interesting kind of alignment, because I mean, even 2017 was in the Trump administration, right? That was with him. Then we kind of had a chilling past few years of the SEC, and a lot of we didn't really know, and just a lot of chilling effects from the government side. And I think some of those are going to be gone, right? In personal form, meaning Gensler will no longer be. It doesn't mean the government's not government. It doesn't mean that they don't have an incentive to grow themselves, or that we're going to be perfectly free and libertarian in January. I'm not saying any of that. But I think economically, and by the way, and that goes hand in hand with the printing press, right? If interest rates lower, if things get softer, that's also ultimately promoting our case too of wanting a harder money. So you can kind of look at it on both sides. Some of it will be immediately good for crypto, but long term, you're just kicking the federal dollar inflationary rate down the road and the Fed and all that. So we'll really have to see. I don't know how serious they are about the Bitcoin reserve. They're talking about it. So anytime you release anything by mouth, you have to be accountable for it, right? So whether it's going to be, I'm going to write an order on day one versus it happens through Congress, I don't know. I have wondered what that's going to look like, if that's just an entrapment of Bitcoin. We can already admit that Bitcoin won because it hasn't been banned, right? It's been tried to ban by how many governments around the world since it was created, and that was never accomplished. So, is this another form of sort of soft capture, which gets it out of the hands of people, so it's not used as the money it was intended to be, but people can still benefit from NGU and the traditional system? Again, a lot of this is beyond my pay grade. I'm not giving you this is what it is. This is just thoughts that come into my head, right? But it's certainly interesting to watch, and we'll see where it goes. But I don't really want to have Bitcoin when there's a strategic reserve, personally. So
For sure. Yeah, and I think many people will think the same. I think most people are motivated to buy it before the government, so you get the speculation. But yeah, we'll see. I like that you're open-minded about it potentially going multiple ways, because I think generally people align on one way or the other, or like they're extremely bullish because of it, or the opposite. So I like that you have an open mind.
I'm bullish. I mean, it is. I'll say generally I'm bullish, right? Because it's program bullishness. Am I bullish for us using it or having? I think it might be further and further from the general populace, right? I absolutely think it's going to be harder to get your hands on and use, especially if, like I said, governments are locking it up. It's going to be very hard for people to use Bitcoin. But we have Litecoin, so there's no problem.
100%. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see this next phase in crypto, the next 10 years versus the past 13. It's been kind of one way, but I'm excited for it. I hope we get a Litecoin bump, which we should, and then we can continue to participate and be involved in this space. I know it took a little bit longer than we expected with your time, but that's the last question I had for you. If you have like 10 minutes, Kyle, I could ask for questions in the comments or read through here, because I haven't been paying attention too much, and see.
Still quiet here, so we can take a few. I'll do my best. You're sure.
All right, guys, if you have any questions for Kyle, those that are watching, let me know in the comments. I will scroll back and see what people are saying. I think I saw one before. Let's see. I see some just random comments that I missed. Earlier here. The Flounder said he sensed there was less tribalism in crypto in 2013, 2014, and kind of kicked in before the 2017 cycle. Do you agree with that statement? Is that what you felt over the years, that tribalism really kicked up in the 2017 cycle? And do you see us ever returning back to like more of a altogether type broader crypto alignment? Because really that's what it was about. I mean, I think
tribalism can be sort of natural. I do think it's more I think we were more like, hey, this is a new and emerging space, and let's all build in it. And there was more of that hand holding, like Bitcoin and Litecoin, and yeah, it was sort of little brother, like, hey, it's the Bitcoin testnet, but like it was still the Bitcoin testnet, which, by the way, is a narrative and important, because if Bitcoin doesn't have a testnet, it wouldn't be where it is today, right? But it's an incentivized testnet that's monetized, right? But the maximalists really were like mega tribal, which kind of just had everybody else in their own kind of buckets. Then you have kind of Ethereum people, and then it's the Ethereum versus Cardano. And then every coin is going to have a tribe. And I don't think that's really a problem if you can work together, right? Like even I had Dennis Porter on my show, and he's very much, I would call him a Bitcoin maximalist, but he's also a gentleman, and he sat with me at Litecoiner, and he's come to the Litecoin Foundation summits. And the point is, what he's promoting legislatively is kind of crypto agnostic. Yeah, they call it the Bitcoin bill or whatever in their tweet, but if you read the language, it doesn't say specifically Bitcoin or whatever, right? If they create a reserve bill, which I think they're working on to introduce to state governments and things, that may specify Bitcoin as the asset to be, placed in the reserve. But generally, it's like the principles are defended, and I think we can't lose that. The kind of the join or die theme, which was like a Ben Franklin meme from a wood carving forever ago, I think that's important, right? Because if we're going to cut each other up, we're not going to. So I think ultimately we do need to be united, but I do think tribes exist within them. I think we're all unique, and we have different use cases, and we have different motivations, and I think that's good, right? Like I think S-CRYPT mining is kind of its own tribe. It's a broader tribe. It's not just Litecoin. Like Doge was merged with or to Litecoin. Bells was merged to Litecoin. But like there's kind of a community there where there's some unity, even though there's distinctions, right? And we could include Bitcoin in that, and even Bitcoin Cash as proof of work community. Like we're a proof of work tribe. Like we don't believe in issuing, tokens out of thin air. Like that's proof of stake and other varieties. Like, so I think some tribes are good, and I'm probably tribal to a degree and I have my reasons, but ultimately, like if you're a Bitcoiner, like cool, that's cool. Yeah. So
I think that's a good
Litecoiner, which is also really cool, right? And I want more Litecoiners.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's good points. Yeah, people are naturally tribal. We've seen it throughout human history, whether it's around religion or national, like some state government, or a lot of people are nationalists, regardless of what their country does or not. They're naturally loyal to whatever their government decides to do. But then, what was cool about America to me is like people gave up those national type identities or religious identities to come together around a different value of like free markets and individual freedom. So I'm hoping we can do that in crypto, or instead of competing for speculative capital and shitting on each other for just own personal gains, we can come together around free market principles. And who cares what chain you decide to use whatever's best for you. Yeah. And then we can naturally grow. That's to me the best path for growth. But we'll have to exist within the human nature that exists. Master has some good questions. His first one is, who do you want to see on your podcast next year? Who are some of your top guest picks?
Well, we'll have Shan back. We'd love to have Shan back. Clint's in here. I'd love to have him too. We've talked about it. There's always ideas, and if anybody has any ideas, feel free to send them, right? We have a list, and I check them off as I go, and it's busy, right? I can't get on every day. That's what you get to do. But we have plans for more folks in our community and maybe outside our community to come next year. I already shared one earlier. I leaked that data earlier in our talk tonight, but I don't have anything specifically to drop at the moment.
I see. Gotcha. And his other question was, what did you think of Charlie when you met him? Like, what were your impressions of the founder of Litecoin?
I think he's very smart. He knows what he knows and intends to say what he wishes to say, right? I don't think he talks cheaply, if you will. He is lighthearted, like as much as he is serious, seeing him in different environments over, the Nashville scene. If Shan asked that, I don't know why he's asking me, because he's met him too. But I like Charlie, and I think he's kind of a model of not being volatile and crazy. He's kind of a more humble guy, but has a lot of strength. And of course, he created Litecoin, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. He's a cool-headed guy. He doesn't. I like that he's serious at the same time, because in order to actually do good work, you kind of have to have that disciplined seriousness, and you have to know what you're doing, and that takes a lot of self-discipline. And going through MIT and working at Google, those are hard things to do. So
Yeah.
he's got a nice balance for sure. I would agree. I hope to meet him in person.
Hope to meet you too, by the way. And I've already put it out there that one day we'll know what you look like.
Cool.
I get to look
Those
at
are all
an
the questions. I have one
avatar
last. Yeah,
when I chat with you. One day, folks, one day.
I know. Yeah, I'll meet some people in person. Hopefully, if we have a rally here, which I think is extremely likely next few months, then I will for sure be at the next summit, wherever that is.
You're good.
So that'll be cool. Well, cool, Kyle. Thanks so much for joining me for this. I do appreciate it. I was always interested, because we've seen you behind being the interviewer, but never being the interviewee. So I feel lucky that you were I was the first one to actually get to talk to you in this format. I appreciate you doing it, even though you don't typically do live things. So hopefully it wasn't too bad. And do you have any final thoughts on words of advice for new crypto people, or final thoughts about Litecoin in general and where we're headed?
Yeah. No, you're kind, and I'm glad to be here. And yeah, what a unique opportunity. I get to be on the other side of this. So I'm not used to it. I usually have things always written out and kind of have a flow, and I get to kind of roll with you this time. But like I said, you have the most chill stream out there, which is great. What I would say is, look into Litecoin, check it out. You're getting it at bargain prices, if you ask me. We haven't gone to sort of the highest of highs, and we certainly have been there before, and I think we're going back there again if you want to talk about just numbers and the investment value of the cryptocurrency or the digital commodity. But have fun with it. If you really do want to gain something, I think that's going to be here for a lot longer versus just something that flashes and fades. I think Litecoin is definitely very, very, very strong candidate for something to hold if you have those sort of motivations. So, of course, I can say visit 84million.com. We have a podcast, 84million.com/podcast. We have a shop. Take a look at it. Add us on X at 84million. We'd be glad to connect there. And we love everybody that's followed us up to this point. I mean, it's kind of humbling and cool and great. And then I get to meet people like why Litecoin. So thanks for having me on your show. And I look forward to watching Litecoin with you and tuning into your show and your streams as you keep doing them day in and day out. So that's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, go follow Kyle, subscribe to the YouTube, check out the shop, because again, I have some stuff that he graciously sent me, and I wear it all the time. They're great, high quality things that you wouldn't expect for someone who just set up a shop kind of in his spare time, but it's like professional, high quality, really well designed attire, and it's cool. Represent Litecoin in the world, be a outlier, contrarian.
We're here.
But cool, Kyle. Thanks so much. I really do appreciate it, and we'll maybe talk again over the coming months.
That'd Sounds cool. Good to me. Sounds good to me, man. Thanks for having me, and have a wonderful night. And anybody else out there, cheers, and see you later. Bye-bye.
All right. See you, Kyle. Thanks.
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. And yeah, pardon the dog. I edited some of that out. It actually went on a lot longer, but I trimmed it out a little bit. But yeah, good episode. My mic was a little bit hot, but I don't get to control the other side of the soundboard. So anyway, cheers, guys. See you next time. And thanks for tuning in today. Check out all the episodes at 84million.com/podcast. Thanks.